you know,
It's an honor.
it's an honor. It is. Yeah.
Oh, they got it cheating on me. But I could make one up.
No,
Where?
don't mean that there's a person on the east
Was he a who?
side that's starting to make a house. This house is
Thanks.
full of parents that come out.
That was my dinner.
Nobody lives there. You guys are good to go. There's a person. And they come and maintain the damn thing, so we can't get into it. So we have to figure out something to do with. Because they're coming out all the time.
All right. Good evening, everybody.
Love him.
We're going to begin in about 30 seconds. Please ensure your cell phones are off or on silent. Council members, ensure your microphones are turned on. Yeah.
I don't want to.
Don't.
I'm his favorite.
Sure.
Not even.
Sure you are.
I want to talk for a second.
Taking that feed?
No, it was just
People
outside
here, I see
of
them.
the briefcase.
No, I get
No,
Oh, no,
That's all I needed.
he's the boss.
no, everything good to go?
Yeah. Really
We're gonna kick off the committee meetings and then Jay will
stay on board.
My name's like Eureka something.
the charter. Yeah. Thank you.
That's gonna be the first thing.
All right, good evening. Today is June 13th, 2022. Today is a regular legislative meeting. Before we begin this evening, we are going to hop into our individual committee meetings. And first up is City Properties and Parks and Recreation with Mr. Jaber, for the record at 6:02 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Property and Parks Recreation meeting, council chambers, June 13th, 2022 is 6:02. All members are present, and also other council present, noted, and guests. We have one request of legislation. A letter from Don Patterson, Director of Parks and Recreation, requesting legislation to appropriate $388.33 from an unappropriated item of the city grant fund to the Parks Department capital budget of the city grant fund as a result of unused monies received from a grant from the state of Ohio Coronavirus Relief Fund. Adult Day Service and Senior Center provided relief. Please be referred to finance. So, no motion on that, we're referring to you, correct?
No, you need to make a motion.
So,
Yeah.
motion
Any
on it?
comments or anything?
Any comments, remarks from anyone about that? All right, take a motion for that.
I'll make
That's
a
right.
motion for
I
that.
will second that.
Mr. Heidick. And vote, please.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. We have no pending legislation. Miscellaneous discussion. We have a presentation today from camera system currently under consideration of the City Parks Security Tech. Mr. Densoff?
Yes.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Baker will be making a presentation. The floor is yours, sir.
All set?
Yes, sir.
All right. I just want to thank you for having Frankie and I here to do a demo. One of our biggest things is that we try to communicate with all our customers. So, especially when I do a few cities and they really want to see what the picture looks like and how hard it is, or, what angle can I hit it at. And thanks to Don, who's been very patient with us and was very supportive, we did walkthroughs on every location. And in doing so, when you sell cameras, it's a low voltage, it's not a high voltage. And then a lot of the locations, you needed to have power, electrical power 110. So we are very fortunate. We have a customer that's been in business for years, it's an electrician, that we sub out, and he's friends with the owner. So we trust, all our subs we trust in high regard, and that's how we work. We work with people who we know and the people who refer us. So this is a pretty big undertaking because there's so many different locations. You're gonna have almost like I'm gonna call it like a spot. I think we got almost 14 of them with all the parks put together and 4 on Lake Anna that we're going to use to have you the ability to view it. A little bit about SecureTech. We've been in business for 32 years. We built a new facility about 6 years ago over on 18, close to 94, just east of it. And we've done that just because of our growth, our success. Our owner really pays cash for almost everything he has. We have about 50 people working for us. He's an old-fashioned owner that the harder you work, the more I'm going to pay you. And he believes in loyalty. He believes in dedication and consistency of how, from the time we wake up and go to work, and even beyond, 5 o'clock or weekends if our customer needs us. Our customer service is number one. And by living by those rules, we've grown. We know this, that in times, because we hear it from so many different security companies. I've been with Doug Williams, who's the owner, for 9 years, going on 10. But I've worked in the security business for 22 years. And I've worked for the real big one. And the problem is, nobody gets back to you, or you get a 1-800 line. And that's pretty bad when you have a security problem, that at least they can call you and tell you when they're going to get back to you, or when they can fix the problem. And as simple as that, and when picking up the phone and being kind, and really listen to the concerns of the customers, that's kind of what SecureTech's all about. What I have is I handed out the SecureTech one, what we're all about. I'll let you read that. But some of the highlights I wanted to tell you what we do. We don't only do camera surveillance systems. We do fire systems. We do security systems. We monitor them. We have a monitoring service that we monitor it through. And we're really big in access control and cameras. So great management systems with access controls that we're selling. Most of our clients want to have something to work for them. They don't want to worry about all this technology and all these problems. They just want to pick up their computer, laptop, or their phone, and ba-bum, it's there. That's all they have to do, and that's how we make it easy for them. Some of the options that are going to be available with this particular application is not as flexible as other applications, but this is the best application that will work to take a picture at a park that's off-site that has no internet. So we're going to have like a hotspot that you're going to be able to dial in when you get to the park, the rangers can pull up the laptop and view what's happened in the last few days. And in that particular camera, there's going to be an SD card which will record for a few days, so you can actually download what you need, put it into your laptop. You could build a file for it, document whatever you want, and take it back. And then that can be distributed among the police or anybody who's in concern, or the rangers, of the incident that may happen. So our major business is from big companies to mom and pop stores. We do array of national companies such as Aldi's, which we started out. We don't do all the Aldi's now because there are just too many. We do quite a few of their distribution centers. They go up to like 3 million square feet, and we have cameras and access control in them. So we're still very well known in the industry. We do churches, synagogues, temples, daycares, preschool, medical facilities, healthcare, senior living, libraries, parks, law enforcement and institution, museums, historical facilities, schools, and industrial facilities. We have an array of memberships that we're on, that we are in, that a lot of security companies aren't members of these organizations, and we're pretty proud of them. We're with the Burglar and Fire Alarm Association of Michigan, the Electronic Security Association, Ohio Security and Fire Alarm Association, the National Fire Protection Association, which is a big one. We belong to the Association of Electronic Security in North Carolina, the Home Builders Association in Portage and Summit County. We do residential. It's not a lot of our business. We mostly do high-end homes or new builds. The Canton Chamber of Commerce, and that's where I'm from, the Canton area, Medina Chamber, and Medina County Economical Development Corporation. We're a certified dealer, I'll try to get through this real quick, with probably one of your best brands of security equipment that's out there. So we're certified and we're authorized as a dealer with Bosch, DMP, Brevo Access Control, DSX Access Control, which we have in the Medina Board of Development Disabilities. We're Salto, which is a door opening control system. We have Uniview Technologies, which is camera surveillance. Clinton Electronics, which is surveillance cameras. What we're going to be putting into use is Axis. I've never heard of Axis cameras, but we're a gold partner authorized dealer. It's the highest certified that you can get, and SecureTech has that. We're certified through Tyco Exact Vision Surveillance. We're one of their elite partners and one of their biggest customers, especially doing Aldi's and the state prisons. Do access control with Cantech, and one of my favorite is a law enforcement interview and interrogation room. So we're an authorized dealer with Case Cracker. So we do well in Northeast Ohio with that, and we're licensed by the state of Ohio's Fire Marshal. So those are our certifications. You know, one thing that Don asked me, he says, hey, who's some of your existing customers, Eli? I got a few here in a list that I'll just run through real quick so you know who I do business with. But our company does business with Aldi's, the Department of Corrections of the state of Ohio. We do 3 schools. We do Highland Local in Medina. We do Cloverleaf Local in Lodi, and we do Marlington Local Schools in Alliance. But myself, one of our best customers is the Akron Area Regional YMCAs. And they have quite a few. I know we have like 15 so far, and another one on the way. We got connected a little bit through the YMCA, Don and I, and also with Stark County Parks and Recs. We do the Stark County Courthouse, the Carroll County Courthouse, Carroll County Water Treatment. One of my big customers is Davy Tree in Kent. New Philly Water and Wastewater Treatment Facilities, New Philly Police Department, Alliance Water Treatment, Monroe, the City of Monroe Falls Municipal Buildings, Medina Parks and Recs, and of course I told you we did this interrogation rooms with Case Cracker, with East Cleveland, and with Perkins Township Police. So that's just kind of one of my stronger customers, but we have an array of different customers that we do, from nuts to bolts. Any questions so far? You know a little bit who we are?
I just have one question. Since this is going to be for our park system,
Yeah.
correct? Do you do any parks? I see that you said you did,
Do
Parks
Stark
and
County
Rec for
Parks
Stark County.
In
So-
Medina, yeah.
So you have the same camera system in their parks?
No, we don't.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't fit the application.
Oh, okay.
Every park has something different, and they grow and they change up because they want different types of technology that they grow, and they want the convenience, and they build on. And it's funny with a lot of these parks, they get donors. And I'm always called by Mike Duplay, who's turned out to be a good friend of mine, saying, hey, we have a donor that just donated tons of money, and they want us to do it with the parks to keep it secure. The biggest problem with parks is pedophiles. It's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, it's just hurting people beating up people. There's gangs that are out there. People steal, vandalize. I don't think that's the worst part about it. They steal cars. People leave their cars open while they're playing, out in the playground. So there's a lot of concern, but the biggest thing is human safety. And that's the greatest reason why I feel that we use the camera surveillance.
And I had one other, I'm gonna piggyback on that. You mentioned door locking systems.
Yeah, we do access control, yeah.
Are we gonna have those for the restrooms that we have?
Not at
the
this
various
time.
parks? Okay.
We're just, we're taking a big bite out of everything right now.
Okay.
A matter of fact, we worked really hard to separate every location as one proposal.
Okay,
Because the cost, we want to justify it for you, that you'll be able to pay for it. You may not be able to get it the whole time, but you may be able to do 1 or 2 or 3 to begin, then maybe another couple, and then maybe another couple, and maybe some money comes up that you find, let's get it all together. So you want to do what you feel is where you need it the most, and that works with you the best. And we would love if you bought it all together, we could set you on a program. But whatever works for you, you know. And here again, we're here to listen to what you guys want.
thank you for your answers.
Is there any other questions so far? Yes, sir.
Yes, this isn't in real time, is it? This is after the
It's
fact.
not in real time because we don't have an internet connection, unfortunately. It's not in real time.
So if something happens, you have to go back and look and try and figure out who did what or whatever.
Yeah, so if somebody gets hurt,
Right.
most people have a cell phone, they call the police, and then they go there and rescue them or whatever the case may be, or neighbors see something being vandalized. Well, a park ranger can go back there in his truck and dial into that particular area, which will pull up the cameras, and he can download that incident onto his laptop. And what happens, after a few days, I don't know, we probably have, depend on the outside because there's a lot of motion, we probably have 5 days to 10 days of recording on the CD card, maybe a little bit more. Frankie can talk to you about it. But when that gets used up, it just starts recording again from the beginning of that card. So you always have recording and past history of 5 to 10 or 14 days, whatever Frankie put together when he designed this. Yes, sir.
If you had broadband or fiber connection to the park, would these cameras give you access real time, or can you convert the existing?
Absolutely, absolutely, we can do that. Frankie talked about that, different devices. Whatever we do, we have to look at it, what is the best cost-effective way to do it, and that it's done right. So, just like all electronics, they don't last forever. And I know I go to the police departments, and I've got some great cameras like I saw now that are 10 years old that haven't burned out yet. And of course, we get a bad camera maybe in 5 years or 3 years that we got to replace. We ourselves, as Securitech, put a warranty on our labor for 1 year of the day of install when it's finished, and also on the equipment, that there's no charge for us to come out there and fix it. After that, there is a small manufacturer's warranty that we can look into. It's usually around 3 years. So these companies are so good with us because they're good customers. We usually take care of it without any problem. But hard drives go bad, cameras go bad. Sometimes it's just a hard drive for a few $100s to replace if you go into one that you can pull up off the internet. So just trying to tell you, you don't have to replace the whole thing many times. These are really durable cameras. The Axis camera is the largest, strongest camera in the world. So they're used in all the big airports. So, but they're still a great value for what you're getting. They definitely are. We do have copycats of it that we sell down to, but in your application and what I sold in the past, it's just a small patch for a few years, and you'll have to go revisit it again. They're good cameras that we sell as a secondary, lower end, but you pay for what you get, I guess I have to tell you that. And less repair, more reliability, Any other questions so far? All right, that's basically what I wanted to tell you a little bit who we are and what we do. We have a full installation department and a billing department and coordinating department. So there's always somebody on the other line that can help you. And then there's always me. You can call me right on my company's cell phone. I'll get back with you, if not right away, within that day, and to listen to your concerns and see what we can do to move forward. So that's what it's all about, and that's how we keep our customers. And we're honest, we don't lie, we tell you exactly what's happened or what did happen, and we give you solutions how to solve it. So, all right, with that said, again, I want to thank everybody for listening to Frankie and I. It's always good that you know what kind of company that you're buying from. That's the biggest concern that we have, that people don't actually talk, to like the council here or to like the judges, because they don't have a clue. They're just taking it off the internet or what have you, but they still don't understand who's the company, how long have they been in business, how are they with service, how are they with the people, and how is the reliability of the system or the equipment itself. So I'm going to hand it over to Frankie, and he's going to go through kind of what that you're looking to buy and what it does for you and how it operates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Frankie. So I wanted to go over a little bit more of some of the details on what Eli touched on there. When Don and I first started looking at this, it was like knee-high snow, and we were trudging through there trying to come up with what was the best solution. So main pieces were we didn't want a recurring monthly internet bill to each location. We had so many buildings, we didn't want to worry about that at this time. As it was asked before, this system will be able to scale up with that. If in the future you're okay with taking on whether it be $30, $40, $50 a month at certain parts, it can be scaled to do that. As of now, how it'll work is each one will have an outdoor rated router like you have in your house that sends out the Wi-Fi. So anyone who has the computer that we will designate for the system will be able to drive up and connect to the cameras when they're in range of the Wi-Fi, download what they need, and drive on off. So the system, some things I'll show you here in a moment. The playback interface is very nice. So if you have something like an incident occurred, you're able to jump back through time and use a little timeline, which I'll show you, and you'd be able to see like vandalism. You'd be able to go back a couple hours, say it's not there, and keep skipping forward. You can fast forward at 16 times speed. You're not going to be sitting there watching it back second for second or anything like that. This is a current, nice platform that we're going to use. As Eli mentioned, Axis is the biggest manufacturer for IP cameras you'll find. One of Don's primary concerns is I want a system that lasts, that we're not doing this meeting again in 10 years, no one knows how to use it, the cameras are broken. We don't have that issue going with Axis. We do have a 5-year manufacturer's warranty on the equipment itself, whatever applies for us getting out there, but they believe in their product. It carries a good warranty, and we're using a lot of cameras that utilize newer technology, which I'll show you some of it, like multi-sensors. So it's one camera that's got 4 little ones inside of it to look every which way. So we don't have 20 cameras all over your nice looking parks areas and just plastering cameras all over. We didn't want to do that. We wanted good coverage while minimizing how much stuff we were sticking in the environment. So I can show off a little bit of the system here, do you have any questions on how it functions that I covered, or anything to do with the manufacturer, anything like that?
I have a question.
What you got?
Do you guys use any proprietary software or hardware for this?
No, so this will all be Axis cameras and Axis software. So these cameras, if down the line, let's say we got every park on the internet, it would be something where we could have like a server here that wasn't Axis branded, and it'll connect to the cameras. It's their open platform, so they're able to play nicely, the cameras, with the software. Now the software I will use will only work with the Axis cameras. We're doing an odd setup in that sense. Usually you'd have a recorder box that you'd stick in a closet somewhere, like the IT closet. Can't really do that when I'm putting cameras on a pavilion in the middle of a field. So the cameras are actually their own recorders. And the computer is able just to pull them all together when you go to that site, so you can see all of them. So that's how we overcame putting big cabinets out there that are weatherproof and heated and cooled. That was another part of it, is we didn't want to start investing all this in infrastructure for 2 and 3 cameras, having these big cabinets out there. Traditionally, that's how you'd have to do it. So this solution, I've used this before at a previous company at a parks a little park area for an HOA. And this is exactly how we used it here, to be able to get around needing all that weatherproof equipment and worrying about, yeah, is it gonna fail because it's negative 10 degrees out? No, this stuff is all rated to be like negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit and go up to 114 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's all safe to be out there at all times, direct sunlight. We're good to go with the equipment we use. Kind of tried to stay mindful of the environment we were putting it in.
There's one thing I like is, if you want to upgrade to put a network video recorder, and you have a secure room and it's like temperature control, or we can sell you a box to put that in that's temperature control. We sell boxes that you can put the NVR in. It doesn't have to be Access, just so you know. Our biggest seller we sell is Exact Vision in those applications. So the Access cameras doesn't have to go with an Access NVR. It could go with a NVR that may fit your need better at a cheaper price, and they have more options. Not all the time, but there's at least a 50-50 chance that we would not stay with Access when they go into Exact Vision NVR. Just so that's something to know about, you know.
One other piece to put in there, the camera models we used, there's only one camera type, and it's only in higher up mounted locations. They're all Vandal rated. That means they're tested. If you ever look it up online, it's actually kind of comical. They'll hit the cameras with sledgehammers and baseball bats and everything like that, and that's how they come up with a rating that it's able to hold up to if someone's going to chuck rocks at it. Someone might hit it with a stick, things like that. They are rated for that, and I was mindful of trying to make sure we used cameras that would stand up to things like that. So they actually have that rating and a backing to that. It's not, it should hold up, it's fine. They are rated for being in areas where they might be disturbed. I'm gonna log in the system here. So this is the exact software that we would use. It's Access Companion. I've just got one little camera I brought with me to kind of do a demo so I could show you what playback looks like and what you'd be looking at when whoever might have this computer were to log into the system. So this is one of the types of cameras we'll use in a couple different spots. It's called a fisheye camera. So this one, I know we've got a couple in the actual Parks Department building, and then as well as a couple of the pavilions. What's nice about it is you can mount one of them and see the whole area. Again, we're not putting a camera in each corner like you would traditionally have to do to get these views. So we're not cluttering it up. And we are able to go through on here, and you can break this down into flat views there that are able to be a little bit easier to see. I don't have my mouse on me, which I just realized. You're able to actually do, let me see if I can get it to cooperate here. You can zoom into this to allow you to kind of move around the picture like that. I've got the panorama view. So the camera looks kind of odd when it's in that fisheye bubble, but it's able to be broken down into these different views. You can see the details you need and pull up the video that way and export it that way.
And you can zoom in.
Yes.
It zooms in.
The interface is pretty easy. This is our live view, which again would be available when you were connected to whichever router that was in the area. You would connect to it, and then you'd be able to pull up those cameras. The playback comes up as a timeline right here, and we're able to scroll through the timeline, which I had it recording earlier here before I got it in here. And all you would do is drag through on this timeline. Let me start up a quick recording session so I could show you what that would look like here. So that's at my house before I got here. Setting up the system. That's what I just had up right there. So I'm going to let it run a little bit longer to record while we talk, but you're able to just jump around like I did with that timeline, and I can drop it wherever I want. And you saw I hit play. We're also able to go the fast forward, and it's got the different speeds up to 16 times. So again, it's not something where someone's going to have to sit there for 3 hours slowly watching through because they know what happened on Monday. They can skip around, freeze frames. A common thing that you can definitely do is take a snapshot. So it's not always that you need a full video event. They're able to right-click, take a snapshot, and be able to save that image and bring it back to whoever may need it. So you can post it, this is the person that we think did this, or this is the damage that was done. All very easy things to do with the system there. We would record on motion. So that means if the camera senses that anything's moving, it's going to record. And it will also record when it doesn't see motion at a little bit lesser quality. So even if it thinks there's nothing going on, it's still going to record just in case you run into where if someone's wearing a black hoodie and it's black at night and they're crawling on the ground, it might not see motion because they're blending in perfectly. It's still going to be recording just in case in that instance. Most of these areas have lights. It's going to be able to pick it up, and we're going to be able to see clearly what we need to there. Yeah.
Is any of them voice activated?
No voice activated. Axis does support being able to do that, and it can be integrated with some of the camera models we used. So if in the future we did anything like getting internet to some of them, and you did want to tie that in where either play to voice or you were able to two-way talk, it could be added to the system in the future. Yeah.
Is there sound included on this one, just
They
in
do not
general?
have sound.
Okay.
Yep, they will do video only. Sound, we typically, unless we need to incorporate that, we avoid it just because of potential complications with certain areas you can't record sound legally and
Okay.
it'd be admissible to use.
And during the recording, are you able to zoom in at that point, or is that something that you have to set up beforehand?
You can, so it'll be what's called a digital zoom. So kind of like when you're on your phone and you blow up a picture by pinching, that's what we'll be doing with the system. So you could do it during, after, anything you want. And if you're zooming in on it while you happen to be looking at something and an event happens, it still is recording the whole image.
Okay.
It's only zooming in digitally, the software.
I'm interested to see the clarity, maybe, of Mrs. Angeloff down there, to see how clear it is.
She's like, no, not me.
Looking at
Thanks.
security tapes and, you know what I mean? This is gonna be at a park, they're not gonna be as close as Mr. Heidick right there, so I'd like to see what it would look like, from far away.
There's always variables that you have, it's all lighting conditions or shadows. So just like if you're going to take a picture with your camera, sometimes you have to hit the light sensor on it. All these cameras do have a light sensor on it called a wide dynamic range, which blocks out the light in the background. So when somebody has a light behind them and you're looking at their face, it compensates that light distortion, and you can actually see the person's real face without it being blacked out. So, and anything that you look at, I don't care if it's through the human eye or through cameras, it's so important that there's enough light to grab onto the image so it can reflect back into the camera and take a good picture.
My touchpad isn't working to zoom. I don't know if there's a mouse somewhere because I could demo that.
I've just seen a lot of bank security cameras
Those
that, some banks, some of their cameras, you look at them and you're like, it's artificial lighting. You should be able to see what that person looks like, and they're just terrible,
Now that they've only had those cameras for about a year and a half, and they're all fuzzy, and they're snowy, and they're not clear, and you can't zoom anymore. It's like looking through water.
Yeah.
And we just did
So this is that.
Towpath Credit Union, they had the same problem. We replaced all their cameras in all their locations, and they say it's just unbelievable. It's like you're standing right there, and that's what you're seeing,
This is how we're able to de-warp it, so you can see how you kind of move around the image there. Now this camera, I'll say, we'll have good detail up close. This camera's primary thing is an overview. The other ones we use, which you guys tell me if it'd be beneficial, I can pull up more of them from other sites we have of the other type of cameras that we'll be using to get finer details. I've got a couple different sites where I can pull those up from to show off the quality of those. Would be no issue at all. I just got to connect to the internet from my phone on there, and I can pull them right up. But this fisheye camera will also do much better when it's not staring up at the lens. Does better.
Well, what if the sun's right above,
It'll be going down.
Oh,
so
true.
Yes, yeah, we're pointing right up, so it's got to overcompensate for that. But it's primarily meant to get details of what maybe someone's wearing, things like that. Then we have cameras on the outside that are actually getting finer details that are, this camera covers a very large area, so it doesn't get quite the detail that you'll get from the other cameras we're going to use in most applications.
Gotcha. Do you have any screenshots or anything like
Yeah.
that from other,
Let me
just
pull
as an
that.
example?
To be the devil's advocate, the number one thing that everybody asks, because I don't care if it's in their driveway or if it's at the airport, can I get the license plate on that car 500 feet away? Unless we use a high telescopic zoom lens like you see on Mission Impossible for us to zoom it in a quarter mile, we could do it with the right lighting conditions. But overall, like I have in my water treatment plants, the only way that somebody can get around to one of those water treatment plants by a car, and only can take one drive. It's called funneling them in. And we have a camera shooting right there. And once they get up to like 40 feet to the camera, it's perfect conditions, you can read the license plate. We don't guarantee it, but it does happen. So if it's positioned at the right place and the car is not moving or moving slow, it can pick up, those are access cameras there, it can pick up the image of the license plate. They do sell license plate cameras that you find in toll booths. They run $5,000 to $7,000 just for the equipment not being installed. So we're not, it's a waste of money. So we're not there unless you need that. You know, these cameras are just a fraction of that cost. So, and they do an excellent job. Here again, we're selling you the best camera that's out there, but it's like the Mercedes of the line.
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
Yes, so this is one of the ones I'm talking about. This is actually from one camera. I get these 4 different views. So they're on like a track in there. We're using a decent amount of these in the parks to go on poles because they can go on track and see all the way around it. Much greater clarity on these. They're meant more so for that fine detail finding. Again, there's only so far you can push all of them. If you want more detail, you start putting more cameras. It's not like I was watching some movie from not that long ago, and they take this super like bank-looking picture where it's super grainy, and they're like, "Let me enhance that really quick." They press 2 buttons, and all of a sudden it's crystal clear, like you're watching it, a sports game on 4K on the TV. You can't really do that. That doesn't happen. We can get really nice images with these. We can definitely, again, zoom in like we were. That's still going to be a function on here. So this is the detail out of the multi-sensors that you'd get. So you can see a decent amount of detail pretty far out there. Another type of camera we will be using, I'll show you one here. Let me get Area 2 East Sales.
It's amazing that all the vandalism you're gonna catch too with these cameras.
That's a 180 camera, which we're using at a couple of the parks. So it's one camera again that's got 4 little lenses in there, and it makes that one big picture out. Again, clarity, very nice on that. It parses it together to try to line up all the images so it looks like one nice smooth image all the way around. So that's another type we'll be using.
Take a look at those cars so we can see it.
And it's probably about 180 feet away on that one
Pretty
there.
far.
So
That is clearly a Ford Escape.
Taylor's car.
Like I said, if you need a specific area from a specific distance, we can put high telescopic lenses, which that's not what most people are looking. They want to see
Right.
generals go in and out. If you need a camera that you want to get a good view, like if they walk into the building like in here, which I put in a lot of our courthouses, you just walk right in front of it. You don't need an expensive camera. I'll capture the picture, you get facial recognition, and you're good to go. That's where you place the camera. So if you have it, somebody coming up the stairs, you got a picture on them, you'll see exactly who it is. Just like if it was line, that you would see in line or her line.
pull up one more type if it cooperates. My hotspot's hit or miss. Does that help with some of the things of like the different clarities that are going to be available then? Okay. This is another type. This is just a basic single camera, traditional, like you probably find, you know, that one. One lens aiming one spot. That's what the quality we'd be looking at where we're using those. And we do have some bullet cameras, which I don't have a great example of. That's even higher resolution than this that we use at a couple of the parks for the poles to make sure we can get out a little bit further with detail because we were covering things like basketball courts, tennis courts. So it might be 100 feet until you even get to one of those courts from some of these poles. So I used something that was about double this resolution. So that means you can zoom in a lot more. You're going to get a clearer picture. It's going to look a little bit sharper on the colors too.
And there's 2 or 3 locations that we're having are the electrician actually dig a hole and drop a pole down. So we can put the cameras on and he can run the power too. So it's in the quote, but Don knows everything about that, right? So.
And everything's easily scalable. So if you guys start out with this and you love it, but you're like, I wish we had a camera on the other corner of the court, we can make that work. This isn't something where once this turns over, it's like, well, you can't add cameras or it's going to be really hard. It's quite easy to do it. We'll have everything in place. Some applications will have to do a little bit more than others. Other ones will be as simple as plugging in a cable and put the camera wherever we want. So definitely designed with the future in mind of if you guys love how it turns out and you want more, we can accommodate easily.
Especially around the lake, the Mum Fest or the little concerts you have in the gazebo, you know. But here again, your people watching, make sure everybody's safe and that the city isn't liable for something that they didn't do.
Anything else I can show off on here or help? Because I know you guys had a pretty big camera system that doesn't seem like it was able to be used for quite a while now. A lot of cameras down. I want everyone to be comfortable that we're putting a system in that's going to be user-friendly and that's going to last. So it's not going to be something where it feels like a lost cause, you know, not that long from now. I don't want that for the city at all. So that was major concern. Made sure we found a good solution that fits what you need and is going to avoid issues that you had in the past. So.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Does it look good to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, nothing's set in stone, guys. If you have any questions, everybody's got his card. You can email me, email him, or Mr. Patterson, or even the chief of police if you have any questions about security. And we can always forward it to him and go from there.
We'd love to have you, you know, the city of Barberton to be one of our customers. Another city. I mean, it's a great community. You've got so much to offer, and we would love to be a part of it. So we're kind of excited. So hopefully you take good consideration of what we have, and like I said, you can give us a call anytime you want if you have any questions. And if we don't have the answers, we'll find it for you and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you.
taking the
Well,
time.
Thank you for having us. I
Thank you.
greatly appreciate it.
Mr. Greer?
Mr. Jaber, I'd just like to add, we're going to continue with our committee meetings. I don't want to hold you guys up, but maybe we can give you a couple minutes before and between committee meetings to pack up. You can do so quietly over here as we continue, and then we take a 5-minute break here shortly to give you
Okay.
time to you guys to get out. So
That sounds good.
Awesome.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. Greer. Any discussion on miscellaneous discussion for parks? All right. Can I get a motion to, Mr. Patterson?
Just an update on the duck cat rescue.
Yeah.
It happened over the weekend. We looked at it, so it's at the vet right now. I'll give you all an update on it.
Yeah. Got
The swans are off the lake again, and I'm not sure if or when they'll be back because of nature. There'll be a letter going out to everyone explaining what's going on. There's been 2 other male swans killed close to here within the last 2 months. The wild ones, they haven't been in lately because it's, well, you see all they probably just had their litter or whatever. But as well as anytime we do anything on the lake, we're running out, running across the street. But we have a letter together that we're going to send out there.
So the 2 that were on the lake over the weekend?
Those were ours.
Those were ours?
Okay, I was gonna say, I just saw them.
They've been coming in, they just haven't been here.
Yeah, they're on their nest,
Yeah.
but we took them back off?
Yeah, we took them back off.
Okay.
So we own these two swans, and then someone watches the swans when they're not. Like a breeder just watches them when they're not on the water.
Yes. And
Oh,
he's-
okay.
He actually breeds a lot of different birds, actually, but he's in Mansfield. He's actually been working pretty good with them.
Oh, okay, okay.
So we're not taking it to the undisclosed location then?
No.
I know that location, but I'm not.
No, they ended that a couple years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussions? I'm
I
sorry.
guess my other question, because it wasn't such an internet thing going on with social media and stuff, is that's a parks issue, right? If there's a duckling or something gets caught with fishing wire caught around its leg, is that a parks
I
issue?
mean, technically, it's not, but we take care of it.
Okay, would that be like ODNR that does that?
Yes.
Okay, okay, that's what I thought. Because everyone's like, oh,
Because we were gonna actually call DNR and we were getting their swans off, so we just had them.
Gotcha. So they just got the ducklings and got the swans off. That makes sense.
I have a question, and I'm going to direct it to both you and Vince, because I'm wondering if we get the cameras, who is going to be the department that reviews the tapes and,
I think both of us.
Both of you?
Full access.
so Vince, have you been involved in this camera study?
No.
No? Okay, well, are you going to be before we get to the vote?
Do you want to be?
Okay,
As
I
far as I
just,
know, the finance director, correct? No money being spent.
Are you for or against?
It's sales pitch right now, so yeah.
Mr. Morber, are you for the cameras or against it for?
I don't know about probably right now. But I will say the cameras are good after the fact. So, why, you know, I like to see stuff not happen.
Yeah.
right. Okay, I just wanted both of you to weigh in on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else in Ms. Lang's discussion? All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Heidig
I'll second it.
and Ms. Fry, and we're adjourned at 6:48, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber. Okay, well, we got another committee meeting, we'll come back and I'll ask you again. Awesome. Next up for our individual committee meetings is Public Welfare and Safety with Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is Monday, June 13th, 2022. The time is 6:48 PM. I am bringing the Public Welfare and Safety meeting to order. All members of the committee are present, and that includes myself as the chairman, Mr. Griffin, and Mrs. Coburn. All other council members are present, as well as guests as noted on my sheet. The topics of discussion for this evening are, number one, a request for legislation. This is in the form of a letter from Robert Incravati, the court administrator, requesting legislation to enter into contract with U.S. Royce Protection Service, formerly known as Tenable Protective, so that's who we have had contracts with, for a one-year period running from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. He has asked that emergency wording be included. Does anybody have any questions about this? Did they see the contracts, or did only my committee get it? You got it too? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Therefore, since nobody has any questions.
I'll make a motion that we call for it.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Coburn. Motion made by Mrs. Coburn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Griffin. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We don't have any, yes, we do have pending legislation. We have we'll be voting on the contracts tonight. I believe this is the second reading, and I believe for the police, for the lieutenants and sergeants and the officers. Does anyone have any miscellaneous discussion for safety? Mr. Jaber?
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. This is for the chief. Chief, was there any updates on the illegal gambling, a location on the corner of Worcester and Google Masson that got raided last week in the shooting there?
Yeah, we had an investigation that resulted in search warrants being served.
Was anybody hurt from the shooting or no?
We don't have any reports of shooting yet.
So there was a shooting or was not a shooting?
I don't know. We don't have any reports of shooting.
This is, Miller, was there anything, you get in your office about the shooting or anything like that?
Oh, if he doesn't have a report, I certainly don't have a
Okay.
report.
Did you say the location was Worcester Road and Cleveland National?
Worcester Road and, Google Maps, right down the corner, it's Domino's Pizza. There was a legal gambling spot. There was a shooting there last week and then officers did a raid.
We didn't have any reports of shooting.
There's just a big bullet hole in the window, you can see it. I can forward the picture to you guys. I just want to make sure everybody was okay.
I don't doubt there's a hole. I'm seeing any reports of shooting, which would not surprise me. It is illegal in the felony business.
Is there a reason why it took so
Yeah.
long for that warrant to go through? We reached out to the service safety director in October.
That just did investigation, good investigation. I don't know if it's too long.
I mean, I'm just glad nobody got hurt, seriously hurt after 6 months of investigation.
Like I said, we can follow the shooting.
All right. That'll be it, Ms. Fry, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin
I'll second.
and seconded by Mrs. Coburn. And we are adjourned at 6:52 PM.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. Give
Thank
you guys
you.
a minute. Oh, you got to pack up in the box.
Mr. Greer.
Mr. Jaber, sure.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Bell?
Did Mrs. Fry just call for the OPBA contract we voted on? I'm sorry.
You were referring to the two contracts, that is the second reading.
I said we were going to vote on it, but are we or not?
You are. I just, I got a call, that there is a MOU that should be attached to the contract that was agreed upon after the contract was presented to council. And I don't have the MOU
Neither
that should
do
be
I.
attached to it, but I can tell you what the MOU has, because I don't have it, the chief doesn't have it, and Lori's indicating that she doesn't have it either. But I know the terms of that MOU, and I can explain that to you prior to your voting on it, or I can explain it to you now, however you would like me to do that.
Probably before the vote,
Okay.
because then it'll be fresh.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you.
We're just giving them just a moment so they can pack the TV in a box.
Exit stage left.
Yes.
I don't want to do it. I quit.
That's what I'm saying. There's a picture of it. One to the inside, one outside. They got rated ones that, this is the ones we have concerns about, have residents ask me about since October. It's June now. It's going to get killed. That's the most important thing. The illegal should be taken care of. Again, nobody got hurt, nobody situation, the neighbor across the street, you know, then does not want to be involved.
Hear anything about that?
Yeah, next door to the
Shooting
Barberton.
and raid that he's talking about, that's over by us.
Get involved. You
And a,
want to get involved by calling police or.
well, we tried to go to
No,
Mr.
so
Hero
he said
one
that,
night.
because that's 31st
I
and
never go there.
Worcester, yeah.
I never go there, yeah.
I don't
It's
either.
right by us. I don't,
I don't got time.
I'm just trying to make that hurt.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything about that.
2 bullet holes in
Tomorrow, I have 4 wedding dresses being picked up. Yeah, I thought I was gonna go to the thing tomorrow. I thought it was today. So I was all dressed to go to it today.
What is it?
It's tomorrow.
What is it though?
Mark's private invitation stuff. So
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was gonna,
Bring
but
them on wallet.
I can't, I'm at work.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Did you
All right,
get
we're going to
your camera?
continue our committee meetings.
The camera? Okay. Darn.
We're continuing on our committee meetings. Next up is Rules, Marketing, and Development with Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call this meeting to order today, June 13th. We are meeting in council chambers. All members are present and all others noted. Tonight, we have no request for legislation. Do we have any, we don't have any pending legislation or anything. Does you have anything from the gallery or from the committee for rules? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. Seconded. We are adjourned at 6:58. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Next up, City Utilities with Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call to order the city utilities. We're in chambers. It's June 13th, 2022. It is 6:57 PM. All members are present and others as noted. The members of the committee are myself, Carol Fry, and Erica Bailey. We have a request for legislation referred from Streets Committee. It was a letter from Michael Piadecki, city engineer, requesting legislation to allow the mayor to enter into contract with Thrasher Group Incorporated for professional engineering services for the development of the South Barberton Stormwater Master Plan. Portions of the results will be incorporated into the stormwater system that will be built with the South Van Buren project. The cost is not to exceed $78,775. Emergency wording is requested. Mrs.
It says referred from streets. We haven't pulled it out of committee yet. We won't be
It'll
doing
be,
that.
if there was
next
something for each one, that's
Yeah.
why I did it the way I did, so you'll have it Monday.
week. Right,
Yeah.
so, yeah. so
Okay, well,
we
it's
won't
gonna be referred from streets,
next week.
but we have to share it, so we're calling it first, because I don't meet next week.
Right.
Thank you.
We next week, so, okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you very much. And this is gonna help with the water disbursement. Hopefully, they'll have the right answers for what ways to do the water over there on Van Buren. And she'll get to talk more about it next week.
No, I won't.
I will. No, somebody.
I just want to make note that I did talk to Mr. Teodecki last week, and he's really excited about this professional engineering. That whole area, he said it's, he was just excited about this project, about the way I'm going to say plumbing, whatever you want to call it. And he's real excited about getting started with this and getting that all figured out. So he's, if you have any questions, you can ask him. He'll just light up on this project. He's excited about this. you.
So I go ahead and call for it, right?
Yeah, and then it'll be called, I could have just put refer to streets. It was shared.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
okay,
All
so
right.
I'm referring it to her for next week. Do I have a motion
won't
to
be
call
here.
for this?
I'm making a motion.
I'll
sorry.
second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So then we'll let her handle it. We have no other pending legislation. Do we have any miscellaneous discussion for utilities? Yes, sir, Mr. Heide.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple questions when I was looking into some things regarding the Truson Farm development. I don't know if anybody in the room could answer. It dates back to 2010. In June of 2010, there was 1.6 million EDA grant that was awarded to us. In February 11, the Business Park Overlay District was going to be adding roughly 500 jobs according to the public hearing, but the 1.6 million EDA grant was to install infrastructure to it with the sewers and water lines and whatnot, which had 12 months to start construction, 2 years to complete. Now, that was in 2011, which is obviously way before I was here. Is there anybody in the room that would know if those projects were completed?
Currently planning
Mr.
or
Mayor.
built,
I actually spoke to Mayor Judge about this a couple weeks ago. He was on council at the time, so I'm sure wouldn't mind.
Partially. So I started in council, but this, yes, I was on council, but this money flowed through BCDC, not the city. So they received, the plan was to put an industrial park there.
this one.
BCDC got
Tonight?
1 point whatever of EDA funds, there's a time frame to use it, to put in the infrastructure. Upon further review, the amount of infrastructure improvements that were needed at that time for a commercial development or industrial development, and the amount of earth movement that had to happen for what they were planning was more than what the grant was. They couldn't get it completed in time, and if you are forced to give the money back, you get dinged on future grant requests. If you give it back kind of voluntarily, saying, hey, this is, we got to take a step back, they don't ding you. So the BCDC board, I think you said 2010 they applied, 2011 they acquired the money.
Yes, it was 2010, well, 2010, the EDA grant was received, then it also denote 1.5 million from the Community Foundation, and then an application for 3.5 million to Job Ready Site Grant. But the public hearing on February 2011 mentioned that the EDA grant money was going to be used to install the infrastructure.
Yeah, they had to give that back.
Okay.
And so the cost on a residential development versus a commercial development, because it's totally different. So the roads were going to be wider for commercial trucks. It was all going to be concrete roads instead of asphalt, things of that nature. And I think they didn't realize how much of it was wetlands. So when they planned out a site plan, it was much smaller than they anticipated because of the wetlands. So they decided to give the money back.
Okay. That was my only question, is if something was started with the infrastructure there with that money. Like I said, that was 10, 20, or 10, 12 years ago, so I was unsure.
So the money was, nothing was actually done. But they were getting money back. And I was going to say that tonight in some of my remarks. I don't know if you want me to keep going with some history of that area, or just want me to wait?
Oh, I just wanted, since it was the Utilities Committee, that
Okay.
I wanted to see if there was anything that had been installed or any work done with that grant.
Yeah, no money was spent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I misspoke. We do have pending legislation. We have the request, an ordinance to enter into a 15-year lease with the state of Ohio through the Department of Natural Resources for the canal land. This is where our water line is running, so that we'll be voting on tonight. Is there any other miscellaneous discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Erica Bailey?
I'll second, or did you make a
I
motion?
got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I seconded.
Okay.
So we are adjourned at 7:05.
Thank you, Mr. Coburn. Last but not least, finance personnel with Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance and Personnel is Monday, June 13th, 2022. It is 7:05 in council chambers. All committee members are present, which consists of Councilors Coburn, Thompson, and President Greer, with myself as chairperson. All others noted. Got a few topics for requests tonight. First off, letter from Thomas Heidick, Councilman at Large and Chairman of Finance Personnel Committee, requesting legislation to amend Ordinance 54-2019 to adjust the compensation of mayor, law director, finance director to $109,000 each commencing in 2024 with a 2% increase or matching collective bargaining contracts, whichever is higher, yearly in perpetuity. 3 readings and no emergency language requested. This has been continued. I don't know if everybody got the amended version. Clerk was, okay. Did everybody see the amended version? I took in everybody's comments. I did a little more research, a little more number crunching, and Friday I had a good conversation with the now former Director of Safety and HR, Elizabeth Doherty. She agreed that to put at 115 for mayor and leave law director and finance director at 109 respectively, that given the fact that they wouldn't start that until 2024, that those numbers made sense and those numbers would be in line with where they should be. Do I have any comments from the committee? President Greer?
Thank you, Chair. I was asked if this legislation could be split up into multiple parts, each being like amended. Is that something that the committee would consider, or are you moving forward with one piece of legislation?
Director Miller? Is that, the question is, you mean like
Could this be
separate
split up per
ordinances for
position?
separate position?
Yeah, amending the same ordinance, yeah.
I guess I
different
wouldn't
positions.
I guess I don't understand when you could do all 3 at whatever you
Yeah.
set, why you would need 3 separate ordinances. Because you could literally choose the number for each one. My question would be, what would,
Right.
and I'm not begrudging a comment, but I'm just asking, what would the purpose serve if you could do all 3 at once and set them for all 3 different things, theoretically, why you would want one of one, one of one, and one of one?
Mr.
Yep,
Heidick?
I was relaying.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
yep. Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. I was trying to see if we can vote each person, like, for the mayor, for the finance director, and for the law director separately. That way we can see how we vote instead of having all one. Because not all of us maybe want to see the finance director get a raise. Maybe not all of us want to see the mayor get a raise or the law director get a raise. This way we can just separate them. That's something we can do.
Director, is that something that is allowed?
Yes.
Okay.
You could definitely do that.
Okay, thank you.
And can we move forward with that too, please?
Well, I am going to entertain a vote for this from the committee, and if it passes through the committee and hits the floor, then we could vote for it or vote it down, and if it's voted down, then we go back to the drawing board. Does that sound like a fair thing there? Because you also have to remember, we have until 120 days before the general election of 2023.
Right.
So we have over a year to get this right. So
Yeah, so we got plenty of time, correct?
we do.
Okay, so to the committee, I would like to see if we can move it where we separate each vote for each position.
So
Counselor?
then, if and when we go to vote for the wards and the at-large and the president, you want to separate them all out individually?
that's a different
Because
position.
we're not voting on the person. This is on a position. The people sitting in those positions should not be a consideration at all.
Correct.
It should just be the positions. And I don't understand the reasoning for breaking it down to where you say the mayor or the law director or they're 3 elected positions. If we choose the wages and it passes, it passes.
Counselor Thompson, you had your hand?
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna say, I think that's why we've had this discussion. You know, we've kind of been back and forth with it. I think leaving them all together makes sense because, like he said, you can pick the different amounts for each one. And if we vote it to the floor and it gets turned down, we'll go back to the drawing board. But I think the amended version, the updated version, makes sense for me personally. So I'm fine with leaving it all together. I don't see why we would split it up, but that's just me.
Thank you. Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. For us, it sounds good, but for the residents and constituents, they want to see us separated. I've had multiple, constituents reach out to me in my ward, and some believe that the finance director has only been there 2 years, should not be already at $109,000. And then for the mayor, they should not, but for the law director, they do see.
Counselor, to that, I want to retort, with them being elected, and I know they could say that one director's been here 2 years, one's been here 20, one's been here 30. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to run again.
Correct.
So if we adjusted accordingly to splitting them up like that, that could actually discourage candidates or discourage current people from seeking re-election that have been in those positions. So, I mean, I do understand the want to kind of be almost a review, so to speak, but once something's set by these ordinances, they're locked for 4 years. We would not be able to move them whatsoever. So that's one pitfall of that kind of scenario is if you judge somebody by that, you're actually judging that person in the position, not the position itself.
Now, we have 120 days, correct?
We have just over a year and 120 days, yes.
So we have plenty of time.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know why we can't do each position separately, especially on the hierarchy of that position for the city. I mean, the council I understand what Mrs. Corbin's saying about the council, but this is a higher position in the city. And from what residents are saying and constituents are saying, they want to see each one, they want to see our vote for each person. They don't want to see what we vote for all three together.
That's to my point there, is we aren't voting on a person.
Right, we're not voting, we're voting on a position, correct.
Right. Now, here's another scenario. The charter requires 120 days before the general election. With us moving the primary to May, that means the petitions must be turned in to run next year by mid-February, which means that people need to know very soon, and by going 3 readings, which would not be the first one tonight if it comes out of committee, by going 3 readings, that's 7 more weeks. That puts us into July, which gives any potential candidate more than ample time to make their decisions, circulate their petitions, turn them in before they're due in mid-February. Given that we moved the primary, that is a realistic timeline there.
I just feel that we should listen to our constituents about this and go from there.
I fully agree with listening to our
Again, I'm just
constituents,
giving you my-
but I also agree with the fact that we need to give people time that are considering candidacies. That way they have time to make a decision. It's not an easy decision in 6 month span, once a pay scale is set, to run for one of the full-time positions like that. But I do appreciate your comments and your input there.
You're welcome.
Counselor?
Mr. Heidick, have any of the other council members heard anything from any of their constituents on this matter? I have a public business, not one person has spoken to me about it.
Counselors, President?
I did have people reach out to me respectfully, and my concerns have been addressed in the whole individually and during discussions.
Thank you. Any other counselors have any other input? Do I have anything from the body? Sir?
I look at it this way, if the people are not happy with the person that's in there, they can boot them out.
Right.
It's an elected position.
Right.
We should have nothing to do with the person.
Right.
The constituents don't like them,
Vote
they can
them out.
vote with their feet.
Yep.
That's right.
Thank you. Any more comments? Sir?
Nothing about being separated. There's been some correction out, funds that were brought up in the news, but I've heard nothing about separating them. And again, they are elected positions, like if I decide I'm going to run against Bill Judge for mayor, that shouldn't be held against him or me as a candidate. Not that I would.
Thank you. I will remind that if this comes out of the committee tonight, not only is it 7 weeks, there has been no emergency language, which means it wouldn't be effect for 30 days after that, which does give, let's see, that would put it in towards the end of August, if I'm not mistaken. So that would give September, October, November, December, January. A potential candidate would have 5 months to circulate petitions to get on the nominating primary election, which would be in May. Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, finish.
No, that's the end of it there.
7 weeks, and I don't have a calendar in front of me. Since we're off in August, we take all the way to September, and then the 30 days.
Yeah.
Which cuts the time frame even shorter. But I think it's imperative that, given that the primary is in May, that we take action now, just because that candidate should have a knowledge of what the compensation for that job is going to be.
I'll make a
Counselor?
motion, we call for this.
Thank you. Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second, letter from Trevor Hunt, Director of Planning and Community Development, requesting an ordinance to allow the Finance Director to appropriate $450,000 from the unappropriated item of the City Grant Fund to the Planning Department's operating budget of City Grant Fund. Emergency wording is requested. And that goes along with the next piece of legislation. So I'm just going to read them both before I entertain any motions on them. The second is a letter from Trevor Hunt, Director of Planning and Community Development, requesting legislation to enter into contract with T&M Associates for subcontracting of the $450,000 to execute the grant dollars received through the state of Ohio. T&M Associates will be responsible for subcontracting with various agencies to conduct environmental testing, abatement, and cleanup. Emergency wording requesting. These two pieces go hand in hand. The city has been awarded the grant from the Ohio Department of Development through the Brownfield Remediation Grant Assessment Program for both the South Van Buren Avenue Parcels Project, $250,000, and the Barberton, Powell, and Harold Building Remediation Project, $200,000. Are there any questions or comments on what these two pieces are? Gallery? Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for the ordinance to allow the Finance Director to appropriate the $450,000 from the unappropriated item of the City Grant Fund to the Planning Department's operating budget of the City Grant Fund?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
And do I have a motion to call for the legislation to enter into contract T&M Associates for the subcontracting of the $450,000 to execute the grant dollars received through the state of Ohio?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
The next is been referred from Councilor Jaber in the Parks Committee. A letter from Don Patterson, Director of Parks and Recreation, requesting legislation to appropriate $388.33 from the unappropriated item of the City Grant Fund to the Parks Department capital budget of the City Grant Fund as a result of unused monies received from a grant from the State of Ohio Coronavirus Relief Funds, Adult Day Service, and Senior Center Provider Relief.
I'll make a motion that we call for this.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
And lastly, we have received a letter from Mayor Judge requesting legislation to approve a .75 mils police capital property tax levy to be placed on the November 2022 ballot. The mayor and I have spoken at length about this. The fire department has the same. I think this is a much-needed thing that hopefully the voters can see as well. Mr. Mayor, do you have comments? And before you have comments, I should have emailed you, but given the fire one that we've had for so long, and I don't know
It's
if...
permanent.
What's that?
Permanent.
Right, but I'm getting to a point with it there, is, I wish I'd emailed you earlier, didn't think about it. So, do you know off the top of your head, given the length that we've had the fire levy, how much we've been able to leverage of that for specific grants? Just because that money has been earmarked as a capital improvement levy?
No, I don't.
Okay. It's, I know that's kind of a...
We've used the bulk of that money to pay for Fire Station 2.
Mm,
But I believe that we have used some of the money for ambulances and other capital projects. I don't know if we've used, if we've leveraged money through Assistance of Firefighter Grant or not. I can't recall off the top of my head. We have.
I think we have, because I know like last year for the Assistance to Firefighters Grant for the radios, I want to say it was a 90-10. So the 10% came from the fire capital levy, where the 90% was picked up by the budget.
So my point is that the fire capital levy has been a well-blessed endeavor of the cities. Thank you. Counselor?
Do we need permanent wording? Like the
Director Miller?
firehouse?
Sorry?
Does the police capital property tax levy have to have permanent language on it, or is that something that's sorted out before it goes to the Board of Elections if passed?
I think it's because it cites the revised code sections, but I'll follow up on that.
I do have an email from Renee, she was working with you on it, of the exact ballot language from the fire capital levy, so I assume nothing has really changed. We use the same, we just take out fire and put in police. So, and I don't recall what that language was, but I'll get that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, would you like to have the floor?
Yes, thank you very much. So, obviously, what's this gonna cost people? Taxpayers are gonna go to the ballot. Taxes are gonna be a huge issue, locally, state, and federal. There's been a lot of talk, obviously, on all levels. So, annual cost of a .75 mil levy to a homeowner of a $100,000 home would be per year $26.25. The average home value in Barberton is $89,000. So the annual cost to a homeowner of an $89,000 home would be $23.36 if this passes. There is a House Bill 140. Yeah, House Bill 140. It's sitting on the governor's desk, so it changes, and he has not signed it yet, but it's anticipated that he will. It changes from property levies going, calculating the taxable value to the appraised value. So I emailed the fiscal office asking if this would change what people would pay. Because typically there's a difference in taxable value versus appraised value, and they said no. So I got an email, so.
So the average value of the house at 89,000 would be just shy of $2 a month.
Correct.
And a levy of this type, just so people are aware, cannot be used for wages, correct?
Cannot be used for wages, can only be used for capital expenditures, which are deemed at $5,000 or more. So most likely it would be police cruisers, it would be, we talked about a justice center. It would only be used for the police portion. So it couldn't be used for courts or municipal functions. So there's specific rules that the finance director would have to follow if passed.
Was everybody in the body, the gallery, and anybody listening clear that this cannot be used for wages if it's passed? Is everybody completely clear on this?
What?
Okay. There are a lot of people that look at it and think somebody's lining their pockets. With this type of levy, it is actually impossible for any money to go towards paying anybody.
Right.
This cannot be used for wages.
Thank you, Mr. Heidi. I'll make a motion that we call for it.
Thank you.
I will second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Merritt. We do have pending legislation tonight. We have ordinance 73, 2022, amending ordinance 104, 2017, employee compensation and pay grades for non-bargaining employees. Ordinance 74, 2022, enter into contract Cardinal Roofing, authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Cardinal Roofing in the amount of $305,500 to replace the roof and HVAC system on the Barberton Municipal Building. Contract CRS Metalworks, authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with CRS Metal in the amount of $211,832 to replace the roof and HVAC system on the municipal building. And ordinance 79, 2022, ordinance authorizing the mayor to donate a P25 radio system to Portage County. Ordinance 82, 2022, authorize Director of Finance to pay invoice to Travelers Insurance in the amount of $4,294.50. And 70, 2022, adopting the OPBA Police Officers Agreement, the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Barberton and the police officers. Ordinance 71, 2022, adopting the OPBA Sergeants and Lieutenants Agreement for the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Barberton and the Sergeants and Lieutenants. Are there any comments on any of the pending legislation? Gallery? Director?
So, a few days ago, while Mayor was on vacation, hence the reason why he's not familiar with this, the union and the city came into a tentative agreement regarding additional premium pay in the amount of $325 per member. And that was agreement that was inadvertently left out of the whole agreement. So they had come to the whole agreement and inadvertently not included this one item. And so they had to come back to just include this one extra item. And because it wasn't included in the agreement, Jeremy wouldn't have authorization to pay. So it's included in a separate memorandum of understanding, which I can get to you, but that is what that agreement, that memorandum of understanding includes. I've seen it. It's in my email.
Is that for both contracts?
Yes.
And because it's not in these, and it's essentially that premium pay, does that have to be a separate ordinance to authorize?
No, it's part of the agreement. It's a tentative agreement that should have been included. I'm sorry. It's a tentative agreement that should have been included in all of the agreements, but it was inadvertently left out. So they entered into a memorandum of understanding that should be attached to both agreements, but it was inadvertently left off. So they entered into a memorandum of understanding to be attached to each agreement. And Director Doherty retired. The HR administrative assistant coordinator is out of state and emailed it to me. Today's Friday or Monday, so she emailed it to me Friday. Yes, and I just been charged to bring it forward.
Thank you. Given this new information, is anybody uncomfortable with voting tonight and prefer to wait until 2 weeks for the third reading to see this memorandum, or did Director explain it enough?
It's been explained to me. I'm fine.
I'm good.
President Greer?
Jerry, I'd just like to say, I know it's a little bit, I don't can vote on this unless it goes to a tie, but I would, this is the second reading, correct?
It is.
It could go one more reading? I've always been against voting for something you don't have in your hand.
I have it on my phone
Right.
in an email and an attachment. I'm more than happy to show anyone the attachment. I just didn't print it out and I sent it to Lori.
Could it be?
Can we
If I
get
could
it during the
my-
break?
I've been trying to connect to the, whatever you call it, Wi-Fi for an hour and I can't laptop would work to connect to Wi-Fi.
Can it be sent to the clerk during our break?
She would need Wi-Fi.
No, from your phone, can you forward your email to Lori?
I can. Yes, I can do that.
Okay.
I'm
If you forward your email to
Thank
Lori.
you.
I'm trying to do that all day, all while I'm in here, and I get it to work, so, all right, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Taylor Thompson, did you have your hand up?
That's what I was gonna suggest, if during the break, we could print it off and that way we have it.
Thank you.
So now we're,
Before any miscellaneous, Director Flaker, good to see you back in health. And the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. So, let's start with the health insurance fund for the month of May. For the month of May, the revenues were a little over $388,000. Expenditures were a little over $364,000. That puts a net gain of roughly $24,000. Our net year-to-date in the healthcare fund is a positive $91,000. Moving on to the income tax fund, our estimate for the month of May was $1.2 million. Our actuals came in at 1.6. Looking at the year-to-date estimate, our year-to-date estimate is 3.75 million roughly. Our actuals to date is a little over 4.4 million, which puts us over our estimate by almost $690,000. We did transfer $1 million from the income tax fund to the general fund. That still leaves us with roughly 6.6 million left to transfer the amount approved in the budget for this year. Moving on to the statement of cash receipts and disbursements, we had a few funds in the negative. The first fund in the negative is the FEMA fund. Once again, that is the grant fund that we're using for the 14th, 15th Street flood mitigation and Arthur flood mitigation. So as soon as we expend the money, we can return into the federal government for reimbursement. The next fund in the negative is the CDBG fund. That is the federal HUD program. Once again, once we expend the money, we can turn into the federal government for reimbursement. The next two funds in the negative are on the next page. Fund 660, the health insurance fund. Once again, that is only in the negative due to the encumbrance outstanding for our healthcare that we have to pay Summit County to be part of the program every month. So as that keeps going along, that negative number that you see will continue to shrink. And then the next fund in the negative is our internal cost allocation fund. That fund is in the negative because of outstanding encumbrances as well. That's the fund that we pay our fuel out of. So every month we'll pay the fuel from that PO, and then we'll charge it back to the departments for their usage for the month. So as that goes on, that negative number will shrink as well. Moving on to the next page, it's the last 3 months of activity. You'll notice that the general fund the past 3 months has slowly increased. It's just over 4.6 million. A lot of that has to deal with the encumbrances outstanding has decreased over time, and the disbursements is going down as well. If you notice last month, the disbursements for expenditures was a little over 1.7 million. This past month was only a little over 1.2. Moving on to the special revenue funds, that has increased as well the past 3 months. A lot of that has to deal with disbursements again being down compared to previous months. Enterprise funds has slowly been going up a little bit. A lot of that just still has to deal with the disbursements being down compared to previous months. All other funds, as you see, it is out of the negative, just for the main fact that encumbrance for our healthcare through Summit County is decreasing every month because we're doing the chargebacks every month to the departments for the employees' healthcare. And then comparing last May to this May, you'll notice the general fund is down by about 1.7 million. The special revenue funds is up by about 3 million. The enterprise funds is up by about 200,000, and all other funds at this time is up by about 485,000. And with that, that's all I have.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions for the Director about the finance report? Seeing none, do I have a motion to call for it?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Director. So, miscellaneous discussion, do I have any from the committee? Do I have any from the body? Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. Since Mrs. Doherty, Service Director, Safety Director resigned,
And HR Director.
has anybody stepped up for, applied for that position yet, or is there some?
Mayor, that's the HR and Safety Director is an appointed position, is it not?
And council will be notified once we make that decision.
Was it made public for applications, or is it something?
Well, it's a pure appointment, but I'm already talking to somebody.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
There's certain requirements for the job description that have to be those in the appointment.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other comments from the gallery? Before I adjourn?
Did it? Thank you.
We have one for him. Yeah.
Thank you.
The number is different than you quoted us?
It's 325.
This says
on your
315.
page, 315.
Oh.
It's a typo.
No, yeah, it's a typo because then the email says the amount should be 325.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay. We just want to be
I
sure.
have nothing to do with this.
You're just the courier, right?
Right. With this in hand, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that
Mr.
motion.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Counselor?
Mr. President, are you okay with this, since you brought this up before? Are you okay for this going 2 readings instead of 3?
Yeah, whatever committee wants. This is, has been corrected to 325, so I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. And we are adjourned at 7:38.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Heidick. That concludes our individual committee meetings for this evening. We're going to take a 10-minute break so council members have a chance to review the new MOU, and we will come back at 7:48 p.m. Thank you.
Well, that's a loaded question.
There he is, there he is. See you, sir.
We will be. Yeah. Nope. It was discussed.
Yeah, it was a surprise birthday.
See you, Art. Be safe. Hey, what's up, Anthony? How are you, sir? Yeah.
Oh, I'll have
4
another.
o'clock tomorrow.
Oh, I still have part.
Correct.
Oh, I want the
Yes,
nuts so
tomorrow, 4
bad.
Adult, the YMCA at the adult center. Yes.
It's gotten worse. And I mean,
This is one of the 3rd term, so 10.5 years at least.
I know. I mean, just finding peanut butter brownies and burner pie. Yeah, I understand. I mean, trust me, you know.
Well, I'm still dealing with
when they did
Definitely,
that
definitely stop by
sewage,
tomorrow. I'll be there
summer
quick too.
rain and everything, they kind of, they
Alright,
make
brother, you
a
said-
little gravel area. I just actually sick. I just could not right there. We actually, one day, my husband, called down the non-emergency number and the officer was here.
I could not bring myself to do
my
So handsome?
He called like 3 or 4 people.
Oh, no.
No, I have a 37-year-old.
I,
I was praying to God at last this week.
Miss being over here.
Past my street, another car.
This was the area, this was the.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
It's-
When you can, I just, this is the years chocolate fudge.
That's where it all started.
And then, I mean, because people, they'll come flying up Lincoln, and I'm like terrified to back out of my driveway.
It's the cut through.
Oh, I know, it's like, I'm just getting T-boned one of these days. I know.
No, he's got the other half.
Yeah, this is something I know. I mean, yeah, my husband just had a heart attack a couple weeks ago, and they're trying medication before they have to do open heart, and his blood pressure was up real high overnight. And I ended up giving him 3 nights before he felt better, and I saw Dwayne Milford, and he's like, you know you can just call us. You know, he's like, that's what we're here for, you can call us.
Yeah, right, we don't want it.
Oh, yeah, I'm like, trust me, that will give you Oh, I'm good. I'm trying to stay away from
That's why I
sweets.
don't want to take these home.
Yeah, my husband's diabetic, so I'm trying to like not eat the sweets either.
Already got the other half.
Oh, I know.
It's good luck.
Yeah, because you sit there, because like when I talk to other officers, I like when sit facing down and watch the other way. And they're flying as soon as they go past the double traffic lights. You're radar to catch them if they're done. You know. No. Yes, Sean, you want another one?
Oh, no, thank you. I'm on a diet.
I know, I'm still trying to.
I appreciate it. Thank you, though.
No problem.
Exactly, I know exactly what you're saying.
Oh, there's. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
I haven't seen you in a long
This guy just, and this other guy, unless he's elected, he likes him.
You know, that's all on him. You know, you gotta, well, you ever did this, I'm like, I'm really nice stuff about Amazon. Came yesterday, it was too small. I tried it on, just push them right through, where's this? I'm like, okay, you can't wear this.
Guys, I just should
So,
say my
then
pecan.
we went out to the
They were selling.
I heard you, $2.
$2.
And it wasn't burnt either, was it?
Yeah, Greg says.
I like it. It tastes a little, that's me, I do too.
If there's a burnt hot dog, I'll take it.
Marshmallows, whatever.
Yeah, I like
I do
that.
like marshmallows.
And I like my bacon.
That's the live stream.
I think she still has some. Brownies.
I'm gonna see if Taylor wants to take any of these home to her kids.
No, she's smarter than that.
But thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I know.
You know, I I don't like the fish eyes. I really
I
don't.
can take my phone, I can look at my house.
Yeah.
In real time.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, that's why I was wondering, and maybe I'll talk to Mayor about this, but what if we had internet at certain locations like Lake Anna and Tuscarora to start with?
Yes, yes. Right. I thought about that, yeah, third party, just to see.
Mhm.
And so you can see Hi, it in real hi, time. introduce myself. I'm Jen
Oh,
Hager.
yeah,
Oh,
but
nice,
we're
yeah,
talking
nice to
about
meet you.
the internet.
Yeah, good.
If we get that throughout the city, it'll be available in all the parks.
I tried, but it's hard. My husband gets up really early in the morning for work, so usually I'm on my way to bed right now.
Oh, I know. I get up at like 4 a.m. usually.
We gotta
Yeah,
put
the
the-
little ones. I know this is like late for me. But I think it's my late nights.
Oh, I know, it's,
I absolutely love anything written like
Hartnell Flea Market.
Okay.
No, there's this little, everybody's so politically correct now. I don't know if it's Oriental or Asian or what. But it's this little Asian woman, and it's real leather.
That I, when I go like the Punk Fest, I have one that I can do, put my phone and everything.
Yeah, but this is only $2,000. And then there was another booth that had some different styles with like kind of a vintage style.
Anything with what.
It's very cute. Well, it's so nice to meet you.
Well, nobody will
Yeah, I know.
enjoy
And
climate committee.
I just talked to the chief about trying to do radar at least on the road.
Oh, yeah.
You
I know. We live on state. It's never. I talked to the mayor about it. It's very high speed. It's like the Autobahn.
It's literally, I told
Sean, I forwarded the
I
email
was looking
with
at
the,
and I said, I see a
residential
car kind
property.
of starting to go up past my street. Another car goes flying around.
You understand what I'm trying to say about
Oh,
that?
yeah. I know. Yeah. Oh, good.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
I have to leave. Come here. I want to congratulate you on your wedding.
Oh, well, thank you.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
Sorry if I scared you with my knuckle cracking.
We need to get
Oh, and I thought my knuckle cracking was bad. That was like bullets.
Oh, she's just accusing him.
Like,
That's rare these days.
Hey,
like mine's a little snap compared to that.
Damn right.
It's good for you.
I got brownie on my shirt. Yeah, well, it's probably on TV now.
Some constituents in Tanya. They don't want it.
Just one mine?
My back hurts.
I don't know.
All right, we're getting ready to begin in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Again, ensure your cell phones are turned off or on silent. Council members, ensure your microphones are on.
That's why I wanted to give us time.
I will do the best I can. That's all I can do is the best
Oh, I took
can.
my sticker off and it blended right in. Okay.
I'm very lucky to have him.
He's just so darn cute. I can't stand it.
I know.
Can't stand it. Look, everybody, kissing her on the lips.
My littlest looked identical to him.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
they
that's
look
true.
like twins, like a little baby and like an old.
Oh, my God.
All right,
It's
good evening.
Yeah.
This is a regular legislative meeting for the Barberton City Council. It is Monday, June 13th, 2022. The time is 7:49 PM. I call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation by Mrs. Angela.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, as we begin this meeting, we ask that you guide our thoughts and our actions so that we may have a successful meeting. Fill us with your grace as we make decisions that affect our community. May we use our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider each matter that is placed before us, and always act in accordance with what is best for our community and our fellow citizens. Lord, bless and protect this council, all city employees, and our children. Please pray for the men, women, and children of Ukraine. Amen.
Thank you, Mrs. Angela. Clerk, please call the roll.
President Griff.
Present.
Mr. Heidick.
Here.
Mrs. Thompson.
Here.
Mrs. Bailey.
Here.
Mrs. Angela.
Here.
Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mr. Jaber.
Here.
Mrs. Coburn.
Here.
Mrs. Fry. Here.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held Monday, May 23rd, 2022, as presented. Mr. Heddick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, May 23rd, 2022, as presented.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion on approval of minutes for
you.
May 23rd.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on May 23rd, 2022, as presented. Are there any remarks?
Bless you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are adopted. On the agenda, we have the acceptance of the finance report. However, we're going to shift that off into Monday, the 27th, so it can be called at committee of the whole next week. So that was on our agenda, and we're going to go to the next thing, petitions and claims.
We have none.
Thank you. Matters requested.
They have all been dispersed.
Citizens addressing council.
There are none.
Thank you, Mrs. Angela. First reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 73-2022, presented by Mr. Heidick. Title, amending ordinance number 104, 2017, employees' compensation and pay grades for non-bargaining employees. An ordinance amending ordinance 104-2017 to add the position of police information specialist within pay grade 3 and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion for suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance number 73, 2022 be adopted.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion for adoption.
A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 73-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 74-2022, presented by Mr. Heidick. Title, enter into contract Cardinal Roofing. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Cardinal Roofing in the amount of $305,500 to replace the roof and HVAC system on the Barberton Municipal Building located at 576 West Park Avenue and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion for suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Jaber?
No.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 74-2022.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion for adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 74-2022. Are there any remarks? Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be voting no for ordinance number 74-2022 and also for ordinance number 75-22. I believe if we hold off and maybe see if we can move on with the First Merit building and invest our money wisely, invest into that building. So if we're spending $500 and some $1,000 here now, we can probably get that building for $700,000 and move forward with that building. So I'll be voting no, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber. Are there any other remarks? Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do just want to point out that if there is a move imminent in the future, that the court is allowed to reimburse us this, and that came from Director Flaker when I asked him. But Counselor Jaber is right. At this point, we would be paying, but we could be possibly reimbursed.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. Mr. Mayor?
Just for the record, there is no purchase agreement for the purchase of the former First Merit building.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mayor, we know there's no purchase agreement, but we, last week when you weren't here, we did discuss there were possibilities of perhaps a move, perhaps somewhere, perhaps anywhere, but the idea of moving has been explored. That's why we were talking about this. I know you were absent last week, so I just want to make that one clear too.
I mean, there's been discussion since 1958.
Correct.
Mrs. Coburn?
The building would have to be repaired before it falls in on us, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Coburn.
That's my take of it. No matter who's in the building, the roof has still got to be repaired or tear it down. I mean, that's a no-brainer to me. You got to fix the roof.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Is there any other comments? Mrs.
Yes.
Angela?
Didn't Summit County Council, didn't their ceiling fall in on them?
I'm getting a head nod, so I'm...
Yes.
Yes.
It did.
All right. Is there any other remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
No.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 75-2022, presented by Mr. Heidick. Title, enter into contract CRS Metalworks. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with CRS Metalworks in the amount of $211,832 to replace the roof and HVAC system on the Barberton Municipal Building located at 576 West Park Avenue and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
No.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 75-2022.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 75-2022. Are there any remarks? Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to thank you, Counselor Jaber, for you do have forward thinking. I do respect your opinion in this matter, so I do appreciate your
Thanks, sir.
your heart for this.
Thank you.
Are there any other remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
No.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Resolution number 76-2022, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, enter into contract, ODOT, Worcester Road, State Street. A resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for the improvement of Worcester Road, State Street intersection, PID number 108370, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend. Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that resolution number 76-2022 be adopted.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to adopt resolution number 76-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 77-2022, presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, enter into contract with Vortex Aquatic Structures International. An ordinance authorizing the city of Barberton to enter into a contract with Vortex Aquatic Structures International in the amount of $69,197.35 to be used to purchase features, equipment, and installation of a new splash pad at Edgewood Park and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend. Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Jaber's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of ordinance number 77-2022.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 77-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 78-2022, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, enter into contract 2022 Street Road Paving Program. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Perrin Asphalt and Concrete. Perrin, the lowest and/or best bidder for the asphalt paving portion of the 2022 Street Road Paving Program and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion, excuse me, motion to suspend. Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Angeloff?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance number 78-2022 be adopted.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to adopt ordinance number 78-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 79-2022, presented by Mr. Heidick. Title, Donation of Radio Equipment. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to donate a P25 radio system to Portage County.
Thank you. Is this no emergency?
It was not emergency.
Okay. We are voting for it tonight?
They're getting it free, they can wait 30 days.
Okay. And we are voting for it on the first reading? Okay. Motion to suspend. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second Mr. Heidick's motion for suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance 79-2022.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion to adopt.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 79-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call roll on adoption.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 80-2022, presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title, Amending Barberton Codified Ordinances, Section 670.02, Removal of Weeds by Owner or Occupant, 5 days notice. Section 670.03, Removal of Trees, Weeds, and Grass by Municipality. And Section 670.04, Assessment of Cost by Municipality. An ordinance amending Section 670.02, removal of weeds by owner or occupant, 5 days notice. Section 670.03, removal of trees, weeds, and grass by municipality. And Section 670.04, assessment of costs by municipality and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter.
Thank you. Mrs. Angela?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second that motion to suspend.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mrs. Angeloff to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Is there any marks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
No.
Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
No.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Thank you. That is
Pass.
3-2. Motion for adoption carries, or for suspension. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 80-2022.
Thank you. Mrs. Angela?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second that motion to adopt ordinance number 80, 2022.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mrs. Angeloff to adopt ordinance number 80-2022. Are there any remarks? Mr. Heidick?
I am opposing this. We've had discussions back when I was on the chair of city properties. I have sent a copy of a residential initiative to get rid of some of these side lots and to sell some of these properties. And that was, well, this is June, that was over 6 months ago, and there's been no action on it. Until we can get our house in order and get rid of some of these properties, I don't think we should be fiddling around with the codes that handle an actual property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jaber?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll also be piggybacking off of Mr. Heidick. We started off, I became chair of the city properties. My first goal was to get rid of these properties. And I worked with Mr. Heidick, and I reached out to the planning director, and we're still waiting. And hopefully move forward with this and get some rid of our own city properties before we start fining and take care of landlords and property owners. So I'll be voting no on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other remarks? Mr.
Yes, Mr. President. I'll be voting yes on this because all of my complaints, or 80% of them, is about related to housing, unfit lots, owner-occupied, that don't clean up. You have one person living here, and the neighbor across the street doesn't do anything. So I'll be voting yes, because something has to be done. You have to have more pride where you live at, and the vacant lots will be taken care of in a timely manner, I'm sure, but the neighbors deserve their neighbor. They deserve better. They deserve the people living next to them to keep their property up.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will also be voting yes on this. I think once we have this in place, that'll create more time for our city workers to take care of our own instead of going out looking for these lots that people aren't taking care of and trying to address them themselves. I agree that we need to get rid of some of the city lots, but I think this is a good first step in taking care of our community.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Is there any other remarks on this piece of legislation? Mr. Shreve?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to kind of address everybody and explain that this ordinance is clarifying. We're not changing anything. There's already an ordinance there. There's already a process that allows us to assess. What we are doing is creating a standard operating procedure for our municipal workers to streamline the jobs that they're already tasked with. Okay, so we're just making it easier for them to perform their jobs. Is all this ordinance is changing? It's clarifying some work. So I just want to state that so that everybody's aware that we're really not changing anything, and there's already an ordinance in place that allows us to assess for grants.
Thank you, Mr. Shreve. Is there any other comments? Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. Director, I do appreciate the work on it. I do know there is an ordinance there. However, I'm still of the ilk that I don't think we should meddle with anything until we have something in place to start ditching lots. Again, I know the ordinance, I know you're trying to streamline it. My no vote is strictly because I think we have another issue to tackle before this issue. But I do respect the work you did, I appreciate it. I would love to vote yes if we had a way to get rid of some of these properties. Right now, we don't, in a streamlined way. That's my only opposition. But thank you.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or remarks? All right, seeing none, clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
No.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
No.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance 81-2022, presented by Mr. Jaber. Title, Grant Request Parks. An ordinance approving the submission of a grant application to the Tuscarora Park Health and Wellness Foundation in the amount up to $40,000 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Counselor Jaber's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the ordinance number 81-2022.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 81-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance 82-2022 presented by Mr. Heidick. Title, Authorized Payment, Travelers Insurance. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to pay an invoice to Travelers Insurance in the amount of $4,294.50 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second Mr. Heidick's motion for suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance 82-2022.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 82-2022. Are there any remarks? I promise I'm going to get rid of that camera so I'm not bobbing back. Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 83-2022 presented by Mrs. Coburn. Title, Enter into a Lease Agreement, ODNR. An ordinance authorizing the city of Barberton to enter into a 15-year lease with the state of Ohio through the Department of Natural Resources for a canal land lease through the Ohio and Erie Canal system situated in the city of Barberton and being a 50-foot wide strip of land for the occupancy of a 24-inch water main and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Coburn's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Fry to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 83-2022.
Thank you. And Mrs. Fry?
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Coburn's motion to adopt.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Fry to adopt ordinance number 82-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
83.
I'm sorry. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Fry to adopt ordinance number 83-2022. Thank you for the correction. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 84-2022, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, Barberton Codified Ordinance amending section 1024.01, pavement requirements for various classifications, and ordinance amending section 1024.01 of the Barberton Codified Ordinances entitled Pavement Requirements for Classifications by changing the design standards and materials and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that ordinance number 84-2022 be adopted.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to adopt ordinance number 84-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
This ends the first reading.
Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 70-2022, presented by Mrs. Fry and Mr. Heidick. Title, Adopting the OPBA Police Officers Agreement. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Barberton adopting and approving the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Barberton and the OPBA police officers effective from January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2024, and declaring an emergency. This is the second reading. The first reading was on May 23rd, 2022.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Heidick. Sorry, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you.
And I would like to add that this agreement, we received an MOU this evening and a notification from our law director, Mrs. Miller, telling us that the MOU will provide for premium payments in the amount of $325 as an additional COVID payment to each bargaining unit member employed by the city as of May 1st, 2022.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick, would you like to second?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Councilor Fry's motion for suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 70-2022.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 70-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 71-2022, presented by Mrs. Fry and Mr. Heidick. Title, Adopting the OPBA Sergeants and Lieutenants Agreement. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Barberton adopting and approving the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Barberton and the OPBA Sergeants and Lieutenants, effective from January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2024, and declaring an emergency. This is the second reading. The first reading was on May 23rd, 2022.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended. And this particular agreement has the same MOU attached, I believe.
Yes.
Because it
Yes.
says, yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Councilor Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 71-2022.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 71-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
This ends the second readings.
Thank you. Third reading of ordinances and resolutions.
We have none.
Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Is there anything from the body? Mr. Jaber?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to bring it up again. I'm very disappointed that the Finance Committee moved forward with this instead of requesting and taking my opinion on separating each position. If you guys remember clearly, I brought up the law director's position on giving her a raise in end of 2021 and early again in 2022. And I requested that just as you guys bring that up. And Mr. Fry said that you guys would work on it prior. I was hoping that you guys would do it separately. Again, I'm just very disappointed that you guys moved forward with that instead of separating that. Again, it just should have been more clarified that we'd have each one separated for the people and the residents of the city of Barberton. With that, I pass, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually have a few things here. First of all, thank everybody for everybody's opinions tonight and those that didn't agree with certain things. I'm glad everybody respected everybody and didn't point any fingers there. Second, to Councilors Coburn and Angeloff, that came out for $78,000 for storm sewers on Van Buren there. I'm kind of the new guy. I haven't been in the city as long as some people. Did you ever think you'd see it?
No.
Did you ever think you'd see it? You realize?
Next project is 14th Street, no flooding on 14th Street.
You realize every time I see something come out, one of your committees for South Van Buren, another tear of happiness comes out of my face. And finally, to Councilor Jaber's point, as chair of the Finance Committee, I do feel confident that this was the right path to go. I would say to any constituent that asked me to separate them and to allow for certain offices, while we all believe offices are doing a good job, if I would ask that constituent, would they be comfortable with the amount of money that we would consider worthy if that person moved out of Barberton, and we had to get somebody from day one to start over with no experience in the position. But Counselor, I do respect your opinion, and I do appreciate that when constituents bring things to you, I do appreciate that you bring them to us and not keep it inside. You air it, and I fully appreciate that, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. Is there anything else from council members? Other department heads? I do have just one thing. The yard sale seemed to be a success this past weekend. I tried to get out as much as possible, and unfortunately I ran out of money. So that was a success. I will just let all council members know that there is a tour going on tomorrow of Marks before they open. If you haven't RSVP'd for that, I'm sure they would still like to have you if you have time to come down. You can reach out to myself or somebody, Lori, with for times if you wanted to make it.
Just let me know, I'll forward you my email.
Yep. With that, I have nothing else. There's nothing from the department heads, nothing from the body. Communication from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize I wasn't here last week, but I did watch the tape of city council from last week and have a few comments from that council meeting. Kind of went over a little bit of the history as far back as the EDA grant. I'm not sure when BCDC acquired it, exact year, or the interest that they received or did not receive prior to getting the EDA grant. But after the EDA grant was given back, I was a part of a lot of discussions. We talked to local home builders. Do you want to buy a piece or a part of this or the whole thing? We talked about a golf course. We talked about a cemetery. We talked about another industrial park, maybe a retail center. So we talked about a lot of different uses for that property, and nothing came to fruition. No one local wanted to invest for whatever reason, so it kind of sat there for a few years. Then just a few years ago, I believe just prior to COVID, a group came in and purchased the entire lot. We checked their references. They had manufacturing facilities in New Jersey and Georgia. They had a relationship with the University of Akron Research Center, and said they purchased that. And they wanted to put in these large greenhouses. So they were doing a lot of experimental plants, mainly daisies. There's a
Dandelions.
Dandelions, thank you. One and the same sometimes. Yeah, really. They're one and the same. But there's a component in there that they could use they could extract, grow it inside, extract it for the manufacturing of rubber. So you didn't have to use a rubber tree. So we never received any plans from them. We had several meetings with them, brought in Ohio Edison because they needed their own substation. So Ohio Edison was on board, but wasn't going to move or do anything because it was about a 2-year build out and all the engineering until we received plans. Never received those, and then that group went cold. But they had already purchased the property. Fast forward to where we are today. Mr. Weintraub and Mr. Summers bought the property from this group. And so I want to give you that kind of history on that. Because I think there were some comments, like there were some questions, well, what's been discussed in the past for this property? So I'm glad you brought up the industrial park and EDA grant. But also with that, it's really not council's position to negotiate on the floor of council with developers. We meet weekly about this development, as we do with other developments in town. And so we talk about all these things. So I appreciate it if you didn't try to do that. We don't want to turn any developers away, right? There's a comment that the city will get nothing for this housing development with the CRA and the TIF as proposed. And I realized the meaning behind that was in property taxes. And I think Mr. Jaber, you tried to explain that on property taxes in general, we get a very small percentage. But with this, any housing development, we would get the water, sewer, stormwater, lighting, solid waste, plan reviews, building permits, etc. There is an increase in services. How do we, but that's unknown. So we don't know how many times safety forces might be called. It's an unknown. But in normal patrols, they will be out there, snow removal, things like that. So, but there's also no telling of who's going to purchase these properties. Is it going to be single families? Is it going to be retirees? Is it going to be single people or single families with kids? We don't know. The superintendent made the comment that there's gonna be 200 families there with kids. Well, we don't know who's gonna purchase the homes. So just keep that in mind, so as we move forward with this. Part of this, and I'm gonna skip around based on the video I saw, Mr. Young was here. He owns a property on Frisbee, and so want to address that, and if he's here next week, I'll talk to him, and I'll try to get out to his property and talk to him. So he purchased or acquired his father's property on Frisbee there at the dead end. The city has a paper street that runs right past his property, kind of dead ends in the back there. It's an extension of Harder Avenue. So I walked this property with former service director Elwood Palmer when I was on city council, and also as mayor. At that time, the complaint from Mr. Young's father, I believe it was his father, and I believe he has since passed, that the city never cleaned out or maintained the ditch behind the property, which kind of comes from the 5th Street area behind Herm's Court, and then ran the backside of the property. When I viewed it, you couldn't tell there was a ditch there because it was ground level. Now the house sat a little higher, but still in the back it was ground level. And at the time, Mr. Young's father, Mr. Young, was complaining that the water was creeping up to the house, and he just wanted something done. So it took us a while to do some due diligence to find out who had the right ownership of that ditch. Ohio Edison has a service station up off of 5th Street there, and there's some talk that they may have some rights there. We had to research easements. We talked to AMHA with Herm's Court, Crimson Terrace there. And then looking at the map recently, the neighbor, if you're looking at Mr. Young's house, we have the easement here, not an easement, but a paper street. And then the house over here, there's a small retention pond. It appears to be a retention pond in the backyard. So the natural flow of the water, once we cleared that out, could have gone up into Mr. Young's backyard a little bit. So as Mr. Shreve said last week, we're continuing to talk about this and make corrections as we can, if we can. But that ditch had not been cleaned out by the city or maintained for many, many years. So we cleaned that out a few years ago, but that natural stream of water may have changed. So we're still looking into that. Back to Coventry, or Trucian Farm and Coventry Schools. Myself and Gen 6, one of our consultants, did go out and meet with the superintendent. We are not required to do that, but we felt that based on the past and this big development, proposed development, that it's a good idea to go out there and talk to the superintendent. We did discuss CRAs and TIFs were a part of the proposal. At that time, we didn't know what the property tax payment would be, and last week it was stated it was around $520,000, $530,000. What would have been, which would have been forgiven or not paid with the CRA. So we didn't have that number at the time. We then, there was a comment made that we served them the notice of the TIF CRA legislation 14 days before it came in front of the body. And that's true. As soon as it got hot off the press, I hand delivered it to both Portage Lake Career Center, because they're in that district, and Coventry Schools, as per the ORC. We did encourage the superintendent to discuss with his legal team the CRA and the TIF, because it was kind of new to him. We tried to explain it as best as we could, but we didn't want it to be one-sided. So we encouraged him to talk to his legal team. Again, we don't know who's going to occupy the homes or the apartments if this goes through. We will have an attorney here next week to talk about and answer questions on CRAs and TIFs and how this might affect the schools and the property. After that 15 years, property value is going to be even greater than what it would be at year one. So they will have that influx of money at that time. Any new students to a school system, they do get some funding from the state per student.
Right.
I don't know how much.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to look at that. So they get property taxes plus money from the state that follows the kids. Years ago, before I took office, the city / BCDC, I'm not exactly sure who, did try to move the Trucian Farm under the Barberton School District. Coventry School District did fight, and they did win at the state level. No one at Coventry Schools I'm aware of, was a part of that. So it's kind of been a new group at Coventry Schools. So, what's the plan here? I think Councilwoman Thompson asked the superintendent, well, why don't you kind of relinquish the ownership of that? Problem's kind of solved, right? Now it falls back on the Barberton schools. Superintendent's remarks were, well, let's look long-term. Well, because they know in year 16, there's going to be an increase in value. I'm not saying that giving up 15 years of property taxes are right, wrong, whatever. But that was kind of common sense. If this is an issue, why did you fight so hard? And I know the superintendent's only been in office here for about a year or so, or still his first year. But they're thinking long-term. I understand that. So I kind of wanted to give you all that after I watched the tape, because there's or the video, just to give you, update you on some of the history, talk about Mr. Young's property in relation to this, and I believe you made the remark, Councilwoman Thompson, that with Mr. Young's property, no one can go across the property line for building, because he had made the comment that they were going to build on his property, and that can't happen. And then just wanted to give you my side of our interaction with the superintendent. We want to continue with a good working relationship with Coventry Schools. And that's why I felt it was necessary to go out there and kind of explain what was being proposed. Because there was, I don't want to call it bad blood, but there was some things going on in the past. So, any questions on any of that? I know there's a lot. All right. Okay, moving on. After the Memorial Day service at the Military Honor Roll, Councilperson Coburn and myself heard from a real estate agent who just happened to be there, who spoke very highly of Barberton. I don't know the gentleman. I believe he lives in Portage Lakes area, but he's a veteran, and he was there. And he really spoke about how far it's come over the last few years. So, I say that because not only his comments, but developers, site selectors, I'd hate for the rude behavior that was here in council last week to persuade these real estate agents, site selectors, and others, persuade them away from Barberton. Okay, so when it comes to our employees, my employees at all levels, whether it's entry level, department head, I treat them with respect, and I expect the same from city council. Our employees are well educated, well trained. They work very hard to move the city in a positive direction. For council members to make comments about department heads or other employees without knowing the full scope of our operations is not only disrespectful, but it's unprofessional. It's just plain wrong. And I would match our employees at every level with any other city, and I guarantee we'll come out ahead. Between daily operations, new projects, personnel changes, COVID, ARPA funds, and other grant programs, we're extremely busy. And I can go through, off the top of my head, you guys just passed legislation on $450,000 that we had to apply to the Ohio Department of Development. We just got word that we received the money. Well, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that. So we are very busy. I understand there may be council members may not be happy with the time it takes to get information. I believe there's the request was a list of city-owned properties, right? That was passed out last year. So if you didn't get a copy, let me know. I'll send it to you. Okay? So I have that. I'll get that to you. But that was passed out last year. We don't determine the success of projects or our own popularity purely on social media likes and shares. Okay? We can speak to a higher power called auditors and grants stipulations. All right, moving forward. Our road program. It was on social media that the administration picks the roads. This is another inaccurate statement that was on social media. We take input from the street department, who works daily on our streets, from our rating system for all of our streets. We take input from the residents. We take the previous year's list and input from city council. Then we look at the roads. We look at the infrastructure underneath the road. We look at what things are going on around that area. And I'll use 14th Street as an example. It doesn't make sense to repave 14th Street knowing that excavators are going to go on there and tear up the road and demo homes. So we take those types of things into effect. Gas line replacement, things like that. This year, we are having two programs. So first, the road resurfacing program, which includes the normal residential resurfacing program and the AMATS portion. The second one, Mr. Shreve took a deeper dive into our streets. And so he started grading water lines. You know, good, okay, bad, needs replaced, right? So why would we replace the street without replacing the water lines? So we're creating a second program of replacing water lines. Most of our water lines are in the street, so therefore you replace the water line which is needed, you get a new street. So some of the streets that may have been requested by street department or the public or council that did not make the list could be on the list for a new water line. So if you throw in South Van Buren, which most likely won't start construction until next year, we'll have 3 streets with new water lines this year, prepared and ready to go this year. We're looking at Wisteria, which has had a ton of breaks over the years, and also West Houston downtown here. And we're going to continue this every year. So the first water line that I can remember being replaced here in Barberton in many years was over on East Hopkinton, and probably a good 15, 20 years. Well, we don't want to put a Band-Aid on water lines, we want to replace them. With that, we're going to replace the street. So if your constituents or you are upset that one of your streets is not on the list, it could fall under this other program, right? So, but with the residential program, we did find that not just us, but all of our counterparts around here, the cost of asphalt is just blown through the roof, tied to oil and everything else that's going on. We did not include any concrete streets. We received, I believe, I stated to council a few weeks ago, we got notice that concrete in Ohio is going to be in short supply for the entire rest of the year. So we didn't even want to go out for bid if the cost is just going to be exorbitant and we may not even have enough concrete to do the street. So we're constantly discussing this and might go out for a bid later this year to do concrete streets. Concrete streets are a little different than asphalt. You can do those when it's a little colder out versus the asphalt. So if you have constituents saying, hey, my street, it's concrete, it needs fixed, we agree, we may go out to bid later this year or later this summer for concrete streets. So we'll keep you up to date on that. Questions on CDBG budget. Mr. Heidick had some questions over the weekend and demo funds for blighted structures. We did apply for the state funding through the Ohio Department of Development for demolition of blighted structures. I spoke with the director of the Department of Development last week, and she said awards should be released in the coming weeks. She didn't say if we're going to get anything or not. We're not guaranteeing anything, but we did apply. We should find out in a few weeks. So that would be some money towards that. The ARPA committee did approve $250,000 for removal of blighted structures, so we kind of have that. We haven't torn anything down with that money yet, but we've got that on the side as well. And then you got CDBG. There's about, I think, $36,000 in the project impact fund currently. So all of this kind of comes together and piggybacks off of what we started in 2012, which was Barberton Forward Neighborhoods First. That's kind of an overreaching program, and demolition is part of this. So we'll keep you up to date as that moves forward to make sure that we have enough funding for blighted structures. So, received a few complaints of repetitive trash and recyclables being missed by Kimball. It's important that we know about these. So we get to log all these and then we can hold Kimball accountable. I realize, because we get the calls, people call, they're upset at us because their trash and recyclable got missed. Well, we're not the ones picking it up, but I understand where they're coming from. But it's important that we do know this stuff so we can log it. Had a resident call up the other week, very upset, repetitive misses of their trash and recyclables. They called around 4:20 in the afternoon. I got a hold of Kimball by 4:45. It had already been picked up. So sometimes they're running late. And I know some residents like kind of the mail carrier clockwork, right? Your trash is picked up at the same time. Well, different drivers may pick it up different times. So some are missed, some are just kind of late. Please tell your residents or your constituents to still call us so we can track this stuff. Earlier today, met with PPG, Summit County Eileen Shapiro's office, and the Greater Akron Chamber of Commerce to just review PPG's operations here in Barberton. And I can tell you there's a lot of great things going on with the company. They're not at the 3,000 to 4,000 employee mark that they once were, but they've got a new director over there. Met with him numerous times. He's been there 3 years. Probably met with him about 20 times so far. Just a lot of good things going on in PPG. They want to be more involved in the community, so that's important. And then just finally, Change for Change will be at Hodges Cafe on Friday, June 24th, benefiting the Esther Ryan Sheep Fund. All right. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. With nothing else on the agenda, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Heidick?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 8:50 PM.
They heard, they don't.
You going up there? Thank you.